So we go live daily here, talking college football, transfer news, recruiting news, coaching stuff. And we are going to get to the speculation game here when it comes to some coaching moves and look at the Ohio State offensive coordinator potential hot board here, as of course Chip Kelly is headed to the Raiders as their offensive coordinator. And there's some really interesting names potentially in the mix here for this job. But this is a situation where if you're Ohio State, you win the national championship, and this is the sort of thing that makes it so tough to stay at the top, making the right hire like this. You're replacing your quarterback. We all understand that in Will Howard. But the OC hire is going to really set the tone for what happens at quarterback, and then understanding you're stepping into a situation with the best player in the country. So this is going to be a highly coveted position.
Yeah, one of the most interesting situations in college football as far as who's going to take this job, what impact is it going to have on what's an open quarterback competition. These are defending national champions. So a lot of intrigue around the spot. Ryan Day, really good offensive mind. He's going to be involved. How much maybe depends on the name. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And there's a lot of layers to this. So starting with Brian Hartline, who is the logical choice as the offensive coordinator. If you're just looking at the fact that he was co-offensive coordinator with Chip Kelly, this is a grad of Ohio State, played in the NFL, and has become one of the premier wide receiver coaches in the country. You look at Jeremiah Smith, who he recruited, probably does not go to Ohio State without Brian Hartline, Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, go on and on. The recruiting that this guy's done is outstanding, particularly in South Florida. He is one of those names that you do not want to hear if you're trying to recruit a wide receiver. You don't want to hear that Brian Hartline's involved. The negative is pretty obvious. You're the defending national champs. You're bringing in a young quarterback. You have high expectations of repeating as national champs or certainly being in that picture. You don't want to take a step back, and you might be combining an inexperienced quarterback with an inexperienced play caller, because Hartline has not called plays at Ohio State. So that is, to me, the negative. However, if you do not give Hartline the opportunity now, which he's been waiting for and kind of working towards, do you lose him as a wide receivers coach, right? How's that impact recruiting? How's that impact guys on your roster? So that's the other part of this, because I could, Hartline's had opportunities to be offensive coordinator before, gotten passed up recently as last year to be the play caller. But I think this time it's going to be a little different. He's been there long enough that if you bring someone in, especially a younger guy, I'm not sure how he's going to take that. So is it worth losing, your wide receiver coach, who's also critical to your recruiting operation, your retention operation? That's what Ohio State's going to have to balance. And look, it's possible this guy gets the job, calls plays, and ends up being one of the best young offensive coordinators in the country. And then you lose him to a head coaching job down the road and feel good about it because you got him on the up. Hard to predict these kind of things. That's the uncertainty of having a new play caller.
As Juan Manuel Ventura says, he says, I thought Hartline was the offensive coordinator, but he was the co-OC, not necessarily the guy calling the plays.
Yeah, and you saw with Chip Kelly getting $6 million in the pros. He was really the one driving that offense. And look, Ryan Day's another guy who is an offensive guy. So do you go to a situation where Hartline and Ryan Day are working hand in hand, and Ryan Day sort of easing him into the process because of his experience? That's another way we could look at it.
Hartline, I believe he was interviewing for the West Virginia job before Rich Rodriguez got it as well. So this is a guy who, has had interest, like you said, at other stops, at other places, whether it be head coaching job. I don't know if he's been offered any of those jobs, but someone who it would, to me, be a little weird if they don't offer him the play calling duties.
Yeah.
What else does he need to prove? I guess what he would need to prove is go somewhere else, call plays, and show that he can do it there for them to want to bring him back. That's the only thing I can think of, right? But it would, to me, be a little bit of a red flag if at this point they don't think he can do it.
And look, the elephant in the room, the best player in the country is Jeremiah Smith. He was the best player in high school. He was the best player by the end of this season. He's the best player in the country. Very close relationship with Brian Hartline. We've seen all the stories about tampering and these offers that are record-breaking offers, right, to a Jeremiah Smith. Does he become more receptive to that kind of recruitment and being just like the college football LeBron if his coach leaves. That's speculation, but these are the thoughts that run through your head if you're an Ohio State fan. Ultimately, you're still celebrating that championship. Very good chance, no matter who's the offensive coordinator, whether it's Pete or me, that's going to be a very good offense next year and a national championship contender. But something to consider.
You said thoughts that run through Ohio State fans' head. It sounds like a nightmare for Ohio State fans. It sounds like a dream scenario for other schools.
Oh yeah, and look, they're thinking about it. That this is something people are watching.
Again, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate everyone who's on with us here. This is Group Chat Football Live. Juan Manuel asking if it would be a mistake. Look, I don't think it'd be a mistake. I think you got to trust him at this point. He's done so much to get you guys to this point, to have these people in place. And you kind of alluded to it, D. Like, Ryan Day has called plays at a high level. So, like, does he kind of just lean on Hartline and then take the reins when need be? Maybe that's what it's going to be, something like that. But those are always tricky situations too, because then does Hartline feel like he has Day, kind of creeping over the top of him, and does that change his philosophy? And there's just a lot of weird things when you talk about sharing play calling duties.
Yep. So the other option is going with, Ohio State was the number 2 offense, I would say, overall. If you really look at all the metrics, the number 2 overall offense in the country was Ohio State. Number 1 offense this year, Miami Hurricanes, Cam Ward, Damian Martinez, Xavier Restrepo, Elijah Arroyo, that offensive line. We know the players, but the man calling the plays was Shannon Dawson. He was at Houston before going to Miami. Houston had an excellent offense his last year there with Clayton Thune, with Tank Dell. So there's a guy who's had 2 back-to-back excellent offenses. Took a year to really get it going at Miami, but 2 top 10 type offenses in pretty close succession. Diverse background. Hal Mumme, the original air raid. That's the tree he came from. Dana Holgerson, when he sort of adjusted the air raid, Dawson was with him. Then he goes to Miami, has a lot of autonomy in the passing game, but Miami, Mario Cristobal, Alex Mirabal, big influence in the running game, which was one of the better running games in the country. You saw a lot of tight ends, a lot of play action, things you don't usually see in an air raid attack. So this is someone who's been around a lot of different schemes, had a lot of success, and is coming off the best offense in the country. Of course, Cam Ward had a lot to do with it. The talent had a lot to do with it, but he did a really good job. So this is a name that On3 reports as a potential fit. A source talking to On3 says you're not going to find a more diverse background. We just talked about that. Coach with Hal Mumme and Dana Holgerson, studying the aerial and ground attack. Also a relentless recruiter who stayed on Cam Ward after declaring for the NFL draft. So that would be an interesting fit. And look, I mean, if he had the number 1 offense with good talent, with great talent, he's going to have great talent in Ohio State. You could expect him to, I think, have a top 10 offense with the right quarterback there.
Yeah, I would expect that as well. And look, even in the year that it wasn't prolific, his first season at Miami with Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback, the metrics actually showed Miami was still pretty highly rated, top 25, top 30 in a lot of important metrics offensively. They had a lot of turnovers, a lot of issues that came up throughout the season there. But I think for what he was working with at that point, and you look back on it, it wasn't too bad of a job.
No, I think he did a great job, quite frankly, turning around an offense that was, this is one of the worst offenses in the country when Dawson got to Miami. And 2 years in, it's number 1. So you don't have to do that rebuild at Ohio State, but I think he is the caliber of guy that is worth talking about for this kind of position that any offensive coordinator in the country would consider.
So next guy who is on, a lot of people's radar for this spot, and if you're Ohio State, you'd think that you're going to probably go big game hunting here if you don't go with the guy on staff in Hartline. Shannon Dawson, having coached the number 1 offense in the country, that would qualify as big game hunting. But I think this next one, out of all the names on the list, is a pretty ambitious one, and that's Will Stein, who is the offensive coordinator at Oregon, and he was a big part of Bo Nix's success in that run for the Heisman there that he made, and obviously we see the success that he's had early in his career. But someone who doubled it up this year with Dylan Gabriel and has now shown in back-to-back years the ability to do it with different quarterbacks. And he's at Oregon, so you understand he's well paid right now. This would not be a cheap move for Ohio State to make, but someone who's quickly rising in the ranks here. Played at Louisville from 2008 2012 as a quarterback. So I think this one makes sense in terms of, shooting for the stars, but he's got a pretty good situation at Oregon right now.
Yeah, you also had Chris Hampton linked to Ohio State's defensive coordinator job. So it's one of these, if you can't beat him, join him, I guess, with Ohio State putting it on Oregon there in the playoff. It would be an interesting fit. I think Will Stein, you're looking at him as potentially being a head coach, interviewed for that San Diego State job. That to me seems like a more logical next step for him. He's a little different than, sometimes when you're an offensive coordinator with an offensive minded head coach, you like to step out of that shadow, even if it's a big job. Being with Dan Lanning, who is a defensive coach, I think it's a pretty good situation for him. The recruiting is outstanding there. You look at what they put together on offense for this next season. Mekhi Hughes, DeCorian Moore, Evan Stewart coming back. So I would be surprised if that move were to happen, but Ohio State's not shy about going after big names. It's what happens in your Ohio State.
Next name here, Mike Shanahan, no relation to the Shanahan NFL family here. And he's the Indiana offensive coordinator, wide receiver coach, guy who played at Pitt, two-time captain at Pitt, and was at James Madison with Curt Cignetti. So came over with him, has been at Indiana, another guy who's thought of very, very highly in the coaching ranks here. And look, you and I were talking about this before the show. My thing with this one is, if you're going to go there, why not just hire Hartline on staff?
Yeah, and look, he had in 2023 for James Madison. You're talking about 16th in the nation of points per game. Then Indiana last year, second in the nation of points per game. Neither spot you had overwhelming talent. I mean, you had good talent, but not overwhelming talent relative to the competition. So the production is there. He's a young guy. He fits a lot of the profile of what you're looking for, but Pete, like we talked about, if you're Brian Hartline and a guy that's a wide receiver at Pitt, who's I think he might be younger than him, about the same, another young guy comes in and takes that job, I think that'd be a blow to Brian Hartline. But if you are lining them side by side, the advantage Shanahan has is the play calling experience and the success play calling.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that goes to his favor. But I mean, that's the sort of move that if that was Hartline right there, who had gotten a year with that sort of play calling experience, I mean, he'd probably be a head coach somewhere after that. But that's why it's an interesting situation for me with that one if he doesn't end up getting the nod. Now, a couple interesting names here. Or three more names here. Kevin Wilson, who at these names that are here, this one to me makes a lot of sense. He has the experience there, was Ohio State's offensive coordinator from 2017 to 2022. And he was the head coach at Tulsa, didn't work out there, was the head coach at Indiana from 2011 to 2016. But the offense was top 7 in all 6 of his seasons there. So the guy can obviously coach an offense at Ohio State. It's the safe hire, if you ask me.
Yep. That one's, what you're going to get. Safe hire. Maybe there's a situation. I've heard this speculated. I think I heard on the Cover 3 podcast speculated that maybe you get Brian Hartline and Wilson to kind of one of those co-offensive deals where you ease in Hartline to the main role with Wilson being the old veteran. So you have options there, but yeah, what you're going to get with Wilson, the fit, pretty seamless. The consistency is outstanding when he was there. So that one's an easy one. And I think makes a lot of sense. You don't really need a swing for the fences if you're Ohio State. You could swing for a double as far as the coaching hire, and the talent that you have will take it over the fence. So to me, that one makes a lot of sense here. Probably more so than some of these other names.
Toledo head coach Jason Candle has been there for 10 years. His name was talked about last year before they hired Chip Kelly. Miami, I remember there were some rumors about him with Miami a couple years ago before Shannon Dawson got hired that we had heard about. So obviously he's a head coach, but he's been there for a while, has had some good years there, but maybe needs a new twist of excitement in his life. And look, if he were to go to an Ohio State, show he can do it with that talent, maybe a bigger program says, man, we need to take a chance on this guy. He ran a solid program at Toledo for years. He showed now what he can do with big time talent. So for him, I could see this potentially being an intriguing move.
Yeah. Toledo's kind of run his course there. 10 years. He's had tremendous success, but they were 8-5 last year. The offense was only 68th in scoring offense. So if you're an Ohio State fan, Candle's so respected, and he's proven to be a good head coach at the MAC level. It's not a sure thing that he's the best name on this list. I think it makes a lot of sense for Candle, right? Because if you want to be a head coach at a Power 4 school, a really high level school, going to Ohio State, having a top 10, top 5 offense on top of everything he did at Toledo makes that transition to me a little easier. But I think it makes probably more sense for Candle than it does for Ohio State. But look, it would not be a bad move at all. This is a proven coach, a guy with tons of head coaching experience, very familiar with the state, and historically, even though they were down last year, has been known for having good offenses.
And then the last name we'll mention here, Neal Brown, former West Virginia head coach, has been thought of as one of the best, offensive minds in college football. That didn't really come to fruition this last year at West Virginia, and really as a whole when he was the head coach there. But a guy who was the head coach at Troy, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach at Kentucky, Texas Tech, Troy again before that. So really respected offensive mind. But, coming off of what he's coming off of here, I don't know if this is the rebound job necessarily for him.
Yeah, I mean, it was a rebound job for Chip Kelly, but Chip Kelly he was in a category of his own, so much success to his name as a head coach and as an offensive mind. I don't know if Neal Brown's in that same category, but certainly someone who I think would be interested in this job and who brings some interesting ideas, particularly in the running game. But, I would put him lower on the list of some of the guys we mentioned.
Really interesting group of names here. You know how these coaching searches go. It could be someone who is completely off the board that we didn't even mention here, and that's sometimes how these things go. But there are a few options here that really seem to make a lot of sense. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if Ryan Day is going to want to get too crazy with it, because you get the right quarterback in place and you have a lot of talent already there. You just won the national championship. You have the best offensive player, best player in the country. So, like we've talked about, you don't need to reinvent the wheel there. But wrapping things up here.
Well, Pete, before that, let's get a question from You King God. He said, I know Mario wanted Candle in the past. If Dawson was to leave, you think Mario would go after Candle again? Yes. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, without a doubt, for all the reasons we were just saying. Like, if you're Candle, he's done it for 10 years there, but obviously no one has come with an opportunity that's attractive enough for him to leave there, or it just hasn't presented itself for him. So if he were to come to another school like that and show it, he could do it with more talent, then they would be jumping for him, I'm sure.